In the heart of a quaint English village, a wealthy clockmaker lies dead in his locked clock tower, a dagger in his chest. The clock frozen at 3:17. Was it his nervous apprentice, fearing a lost inheritance, his bitter rival, burning with envy, or his estranged son, back for revenge? Only Hercule Poirot, with his brilliant mind, can unravel the secrets of a hidden passage. A tampered chime, and a family crest that points to betrayal. Time ticks on, but the truth waits for no one in the Clocktower Conspiracy. Chapter 1. The Festival and the fall. The autumn sun cast a golden haze over St. Aldwyn's, a quaint English town nestled in the folds of the Cotswolds, where the annual harvest festival filled the air with the hum of merriment. Market stalls lined the cobbled square, their awnings bright with reds and yellows, offering cider, pies, and trinkets to villagers and visitors alike. Children darted through the crowd, clutching sticky toffee apples, while a fiddler's tune competed with the chatter of gossip. At the center of it all loomed the ancient clock tower, its weathered stones standing sentinel, its great bronze face gleaming as though polished by time itself. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored coat and gleaming patent leather shoes, strolled beside Captain Hastings, his old friend, whose ruddy cheeks betrayed his delight in the rustic charm. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice precise, his mustache quivering slightly as he surveyed the scene. "This festival, it is charming, yes, but it lacks order. The English, they revel in chaos." Hastings laughed, accustomed to Poirot's fastidious nature. "Nonsense, Poirot. It's just good fun. You should try the cider, it's the best in the county." Poirot's eyes twinkled, but he waved a gloved hand. "Cider, Hastings, clouds the mind. I prefer the clarity of observation." Their banter was cut short by a piercing scream that sliced through the festival's din. Heads turned, laughter faltered, and a hush spread like ripples on a pond. The cry had come from the clock tower. A young woman, her apron dusted with flour, pointed upward, her face pale. "Up there, something's happened." A crowd gathered at the tower's base, their murmurs growing as Poirot and Hastings pushed through. A constable, red-faced and puffing, was already barring the narrow door. "Stay back, all of you," he barked. But Poirot's air of authority parted the throng as easily as a knife through butter. "Monsieur Poirot," said, his voice calm, but commanding, "I am Hercule Poirot. Permit me to assist." The constable hesitated, then stepped aside, muttering about city detectives. Poirot, with Hastings trailing, ascended the spiral staircase, the air growing cooler and mustier with each step. The wooden steps creaked underfoot, and the faint tick of the clock's mechanism grew louder. A heartbeat in the stone tower. At the summit, in the shadowed chamber where the great gears turned, they found Sir Reginald Vane. He lay crumpled on the dusty floor, his fine waistcoat stained crimson, a dagger protruding from his chest. His eyes, wide and glassy, stared at the ceiling, where cobwebs clung to the rafters. The clock's hands, visible through the open mechanism, pointed to 3:17 p.m., frozen as though time itself had paused to mark the tragedy. Hastings gasped, "Good Lord, Poirot, he's been murdered." Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the dagger without touching it. The weapon was no common blade. Its hilt was ornate, silver filigree curling like vines, glinting in the dim light. "This," Poirot murmured, "is not the tool of a ruffian. It is a thing of beauty, and beauty in murder is always significant." He rose, his eyes sweeping the room. The chamber was small, cluttered with gears and levers, the air heavy with the scent of oil and metal. A single window, high and narrow, admitted a sliver of daylight. The door, heavy oak, was locked from within, the key still in Sir Reginald's pocket. No footprints marred the dust, save those of the victim, and no signs of struggle disturbed the scene. Inspector Grange, a burly man with a mustache that rivaled Poirot's in size, if not in elegance, arrived, panting from the climb. Robbery. Plain as day, he declared, mopping his brow. Some thief caught him unawares, stabbed him, and fled. Poirot's lips curved in a faint, skeptical smile. A thief, Inspector, who leaves a dagger of such value, who locks the door, and takes nothing. Nan, this is no robbery. This is a crime of precision, of purpose. His gaze returned to the clock, its gears silent, but gleaming with fresh oil. The clock, it knows something. It is not merely a witness, it is a player in this drama. Hastings shivered, the chill of the tower mingling with the weight of Poirot's words. Below, the festival's music resumed, a jarring contrast to the grim scene above. Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes bright with the spark of a puzzle. "Come, Hastings," he said. "We descend to meet the living, for among them walks the one who stopped Sir Reginald's time, and Hercule Poirot will find them." Chapter 2. The scene of the crime. The clock tower of St. Aldwyn's loomed over the festival square like a silent judge, its bronze face catching the fading light of the autumn afternoon. Hercule Poirot, his polished shoes clicking with measured precision on the worn stone steps, ascended the spiral staircase once more, Captain Hastings at his heels. The air grew cooler with each turn, the festive hum of the crowd below muffled by the thick walls. The faint, rhythmic tick of the clock's mechanism pulsed like a heartbeat, a reminder that time, though paused for Sir Reginald Vane, marched on for the living. Poirot's mustache twitched, his gray cells already stirring with the challenge of the locked room and the body within. At the summit, the chamber opened before them, a cavern of iron and shadow. The great gears of the clock, vast and intricate, dominated the space, their teeth gleaming with fresh oil under the dim glow of a single lantern. Sir Reginald Vane lay, as they had left him, sprawled on the dusty floor, his fine waistcoat soaked in crimson. The dagger in his chest, its silver hilt etched with filigree, seemed almost ceremonial, a relic of some bygone era rather than a tool of violence. The clock's hands, visible through the open mechanism, stood frozen at 3:17 p.m., a silent accusation etched in time. Inspector Grange, his heavy boots thudding as he joined them, surveyed the scene with a scowl. "Nasty business," he muttered, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. "I've seen my share of murders, Mr. Poirot, but this one's a puzzle. Door locked, key in the victim's pocket, no windows big enough for a man to climb through, looks like the devil himself did it, and vanished." His tone carried the confidence of a man who preferred simple solutions, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Poirot, undeterred by the inspector's bluster, knelt beside the body, his gloved hands hovering over the dagger without touching it. "The devil, Inspector, does not use daggers of such craftsmanship," he said softly. "This weapon, it is not common. It speaks of intention, of history." He tilted his head, studying the hilt's intricate design, a pattern of vines and leaves, curling around an embossed crest. "A family emblem, perhaps," he mused, "or a mark of ownership. We shall see." Rising, Poirot's gaze swept the room with the precision of a watchmaker. The chamber was small, no more than 12 feet across, its stone walls bare save for a few cobwebs clinging to the corners. A narrow window, high and arched, admitted a sliver of daylight, too small for even a child to pass through. The floor, coated in a fine layer of dust, bore only the faint outline of Sir Reginald's shoes, leading from the door to the spot where he fell. No other footprints disturbed the scene. No signs of struggle marred the order of the gears. The heavy oak door, still locked when the constable had forced it open, hung slightly ajar now, its iron key resting in Sir Reginald's pocket. Untouched by blood. Hastings, standing near the gears, shivered despite his coat. "It's eerie, Poirot," he said. "A locked room, a man stabbed, and no trace of the killer. How could anyone get in or out? It's impossible." His voice carried the earnest bafflement of a man accustomed to straightforward solutions. and Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. Impossible, mon ami. Non, non. The impossible is merely the possible dressed in disguise. The truth lies in the details, and the details, they speak. Poirot stepped toward the clock's mechanism, his eyes narrowing as he examined the gears. They were vast, their iron teeth meshed with mathematical precision, each cog oiled to perfection. A small brass lever, barely noticeable, protruded from the mechanism's frame. Poirot touched it lightly, with a gloved finger, noting its smoothness. "This oil," he said, "it is fresh. Someone has tended to this clock recently, with great care." Inspector Grange snorted. "Likely the apprentice, Thomas Finch. He was always tinkering with Sir Reginald's clocks. Doesn't mean he's a killer." Poirot raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, his attention shifting to a small wooden stool tucked beneath the gears. It was unremarkable, save for a faint smear of oil on its edge, matching the sheen on the mechanism. "Curious," Poirot murmured. "A stool, yet no sign it was used. And yet, this oil." He moved to the window, craning his neck to peer through the narrow slit. Below, the festival continued, its music a distant echo. The drop was sheer, the tower's outer wall smooth and unscalable. "No exit here," he said, more to himself than to Hastings or Grange. And yet, the killer departed. How? Grange, growing impatient, gestured to the body. "The dagger's the key, I'd wager. Find out who owns it, and you've got your man. Probably some vagrant who pinched it from the manor, got caught stealing, and turned violent." His theory, delivered with the certainty of a man who disliked complications, hung in the air like stale smoke. Poirot's eyes gleamed with polite disdain. A vagrant inspector, who locks the door after his crime, who leaves no footprints, no trace, and uses a dagger of such value. "Nan, this is no crime of impulse. This is a plan, meticulous and deliberate. The lock, the key, the clock, they are all part of the design." He turned to the door, examining its heavy iron hinges. The lock was old but sturdy, its mechanism unforced. The key, when retrieved from Sir Reginald's pocket by the constable, was clean, unmarred by blood or dust. "The key," Poirot said. "It is in the wrong place. It should not be so pristine." Hastings frowned. "What do you mean, Poirot?" The door was locked from the inside. The key was in his pocket. "Surely that proves no one else was here." Poirot shook his head, his expression one of patient exasperation. "Mon ami, a locked door is not a wall. It is a challenge. And the key, it tells us not what happened, but what the killer wishes us to believe." He stepped back to the body, his gaze lingering on Sir Reginald's hands. They were soft, uncalloused, the hands of a man who designed clocks rather than built them. A faint smudge of ink stained his right thumb, suggesting recent correspondence. Poirot's mind flickered to the possibilities. Perhaps a letter, a will, a threat. He made a mental note to search the manor later. For now, the chamber held his focus. The absence of struggle intrigued him most. Sir Reginald's waistcoat was undisturbed, save for the blood. His watch chain still neatly tucked, his spectacles resting on his nose. He knew his killer, Poirot said softly. He faced them without fear, without resistance. This was no stranger. Grange, scribbling notes, looked up. "You're saying it's someone close. His son, maybe. That Edmund Vane's, a surly sort, turned up out of nowhere after years away. Or that rival, Margaret Colshe's got a temper, and no love for Sir Reginald. Even the apprentice, Finch, could have had a grudge." His voice carried the enthusiasm of a man eager to round up suspects, but Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, Inspector. Suspicions are not solutions. We must observe, not assume." He turned to the gears once more, his fingers brushing the air above them, as if tracing an invisible thread. The mechanism was a marvel, its cogs aligned to move the great hands with unerring accuracy. Yet something was amiss. Poirot leaned closer, his eyes catching a faint irregularity, a cog slightly misaligned, its teeth not quite meshed. "This," he said, pointing, "is not an accident. Someone has tampered with the clock. But why?" Hastings, peering over his shoulder, scratched his head. To stop it, perhaps. To mark the time of death. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps mon ami, or perhaps to tell a lie. Time, it is the greatest deceiver. He straightened, dusting his gloves with a handkerchief. We must learn who had access to this tower, who knew its secrets. The clockmaker. He was not alone in his craft. Grange, growing restless, gestured to the constable. "I'll have the body moved and the dagger sent for examination. We'll round up the suspects Finch, Cole, and young Vane. They'll have questions to answer." Poirot nodded, though his mind was elsewhere, already piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The oil, the dagger, the locked door, the misaligned coggage was a note in a symphony of deceit, and Hercule Poirot was determined to conduct it to its conclusion. As they descended the staircase, the festival's music grew louder, a jarring reminder of life continuing below. Hastings, his face pale, murmured, "It's a grim business, Poirot. Whoever did this planned it carefully. To kill a man in a locked tower, in broad daylight." Poirot paused on the steps, his eyes distant. Hastings. It is a crime of audacity, of precision. But the mind that plans so carefully always leaves a trace, and that trace I shall find." At the tower's base, the crowd had thinned, though curious eyes still lingered. Poirot's gaze swept over them, noting the faces, some anxious, some merely curious. Among them, he glimpsed a young man with ink-stained fingers, his eyes darting nervously, a woman with a sharp jaw and a stall of gleaming clocks, and a brooding figure in a dark coat, his cigarette glowing like a beacon. The apprentice, the rival, the son. Poirot's mustache twitched. "The players are assembled," he said softly to Hastings. "Now, the game begins." They stepped into the square, the festival's cheer a stark contrast to the chill of the tower. Poirot adjusted his hat, his mind already turning to the manor, the suspects, and the secrets they held. The clock tower loomed behind them, its hands still frozen, a silent witness to a crime that spoke of betrayal, ambition, and time. Manipulated, Hercule Poirot, with his little gray cells, would unravel it all. Chapter 3. The Suspects Assemble. The drawing room of Vane Manor was a study in faded grandeur, its high ceilings adorned with intricate plasterwork, its heavy velvet curtains muffling the distant strains of the harvest festival. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and old books, a fitting stage for the drama about to unfold. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small, fastidious figure a sharp contrast to the sprawling opulence around him. His hands were clasped behind his back, his head tilted slightly, as if listening to the whispers of the room itself. Captain Hastings, seated on a brocaded chair, fidgeted with his cufflinks, his honest face creased with anticipation. Inspector Grange, less at ease in the manor's elegance, stood by the door, his notebook clutched like a shield. Poirot had requested the presence of the three individuals most closely tied to Sir Reginald Vane's life, and now, his death. The air was thick with tension as they entered, one by one, each carrying the weight of suspicion in their posture, their eyes, their silence. Poirot's gaze, sharp as a jeweler's loop, missed nothing: the flicker of a glance, the tightening of a jaw, the tremor of a hand. These, he knew, were the threads from which truth could be woven. First came Thomas Finch, the apprentice, a lanky young man of perhaps 25, with a mop of sandy hair and fingers stained with ink and oil. His eyes, pale and restless, darted about the room, avoiding Poirot's steady stare. He wore a threadbare jacket, too large for his narrow frame, and his shoulders hunched as if braced for a blow. He took a seat on the edge of a settee, his hands twisting in his lap, the picture of a man ill at ease with scrutiny. Poirot noted the faint tremor in his fingers, the way his gaze lingered on the portrait of Sir Reginald above the mantel, stern likeness of the clockmaker, his eyes cold and commanding. Next entered Margaret Cole, the rival clockmaker, a woman of middle years, whose angular features and upright posture spoke of defiance. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, accentuating the sharpness of her cheekbones, and her eyes, a piercing gray, held a challenge that bordered on disdain. She wore a practical dress of navy wool. Its only adornment, a small silver brooch shaped like a pocket watch, a subtle jab, perhaps, at her late competitor. She chose a chair near the window, sitting with the poise of one accustomed to holding her own in a man's trade. Her lips were a thin line, but Poirot caught the faintest quiver when her gaze passed over Finch, as if some unspoken history lingered between them. Last came Edmund Vane, the estranged son, a tall man in his early 30s, with a face that might have been handsome were it not for the shadow of bitterness that clung to it. His dark hair was unkempt, his coat rumpled, and a cigarette dangled from his lips, its smoke curling lazily upward. He did not sit, but leaned against a bookcase, his arms crossed, his eyes narrowed with a defiance that seemed more habit than intent. The dust on his boots, faint but unmistakable, caught Poirot's eye, a detail that connected him, however, faintly, to the clock-tower's dusty floor. His resemblance to the portrait of Sir Reginald was striking, yet where the father's eyes had been cold, Edmund's burned with a smoldering resentment. Poirot cleared his throat, a delicate sound that nonetheless commanded the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice smooth as polished glass. "We are gathered to discuss a tragedy, the murder of Sir Reginald Vane, struck down in his own clock tower, in a room locked from within. You, each of you, were close to him in life. Now, you are close to his death. I, Hercule Poirot, seek the truth, and I assure you, it will be found." Inspector Grange shifted, his boots creaking on the polished floor. "We'll need your accounts of where you were at 3:17 this afternoon, when Sir Reginald was killed. No nonsense. Now, the sooner we sort this, the better." His tone was gruff, but Poirot's raised hand silenced him. "Patience, Inspector," Poirot said. "The truth, it does not yield to haste. Let us begin with you, Monsieur Finch. You were Sir Reginald's apprentice. Tell me of your day." Finch swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. I was in the workshop, sir, below the tower, repairing a mantel clock for Mrs. Harrow. It's delicate work, takes focus. I didn't leave till the festival bell rang at 3:30. Everyone heard it." His voice was earnest, but his fingers twisted tighter, and Poirot noted a faint sheen of sweat on his brow. "Indeed," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "And this workshop, it is near the clock tower, yes. You heard nothing, no cry, no sound of struggle?" Finch shook his head, too quickly. "Nothing, sir, just the clocks ticking and the festival outside." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And your hands, Monsieur Finch, they are stained with ink and oil. Yet your apron, it was clean when I saw you in the square. Curious, for a man at work." Finch flushed. I washed up before joining the festival. Didn't want to look a mess." Poirot's smile was faint, almost pitying. "A fastidious apprentice. Most commendable." He turned to Margaret Cole, whose gray eyes met his with a spark of defiance. "Madame Cole, you are a maker of clocks, a rival to Sir Reginald. Your feelings for him, they were not warm, I think." Her lips twitched, but she held his gaze. "He was a bully in business," she said, her voice crisp. "Undercut my prices, poached my clients, but I didn't kill him. I was at my stall, selling my work. Ask anyone in the square, and they will confirm this, no doubt," Poirot said smoothly. "But tell me, madam, were you at your stall at precisely 3:17? Or perhaps you stepped away, to adjust a clock, to fetch a tool. Her eyes flickered, just for a moment. I was there, she said firmly. I don't recall every minute, but I was busy. Festivals are good for trade. Poirot nodded, noting the slight tension in her shoulders. In this trade, it was not harmed by Sir Reginald's death, perhaps. Her jaw tightened. I don't profit from murder, Mr. Poirot. My work speaks for itself. But Poirot's gaze lingered on her brooch, its watch-like design a mirror to the oil-slick gears of the clock tower. A coincidence, or something more? Finally, he turned to Edmund Vane, who exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes cold. Monsieur Vane, you are the son, yet you were not welcome in your father's house. Why return to St. Aldwyn's now? Edmund's lip curled. I came to settle old scores. He cut me off years ago, after a misunderstanding. I wanted what was mine. His voice was low, bitter, each word a wound reopened. And where were you at 3:17? Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. Edmund shrugged. At the Red Lion, having a pint. Barkeep'll tell you. Poirot's eyes flicked to the dust, on Edmund's boots, a faint echo of the clock tower's floor. You are fond of walking, Monsieur Vane? Your boots, they carry the dust of places not found in an inn. Edmund's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, taking a long drag on his cigarette. Poirot let the silence hang, heavy as the air before a storm. He stepped to the center of the room, his small frame commanding despite its size. Each of you claims innocence, he said. Yet one of you, or perhaps more, knows more than you say. The dagger, the locked door, the clock, they tell a story, and I, Hercule Poirot, will read it. Hastings, watching from his chair, leaned forward. But, Poirot, the room was locked. How could any of them have done it? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The how, mon ami, is a matter of mechanics. The why, that is a matter of the heart. And both I shall uncover. Inspector Grange cleared his throat. We'll take their statements formally, Mr. Poirot, but I'm betting on the son. He's got motive, and that dust on his boots is damning. Poirot raised a hand. Motive, Inspector, is not proof. We must look deeper into the lives, the secrets, the clock itself. He turned to the suspects, his eyes bright with purpose. You may go, for now. But rest assured, the truth, it does not hide forever. As the three filed out, Finch's steps hurried, Cole's measured, and Edmund's deliberately slow. Poirot stood motionless, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The ink on Finch's fingers, the brooch on Cole's dress, the dust on Edmund's boots, each was a piece of the puzzle, and above it all, the clock tower loomed in his mind, its frozen hands a challenge to his little gray cells. The festivals, music drifted through the window, a reminder that life continued, but for Poirot, the game was only beginning. Chapter 4. The Apprentice's Tale. The late afternoon light filtered through the leaded windows of Vane Manor, casting a lattice of shadows across the oak-paneled study where Hercule Poirot had chosen to conduct his inquiries. The room, smaller and more intimate than the grand drawing-room, was lined with shelves of leather-bound ledgers and clock-making manuals, their spines worn from years of use. A faint metallic temps lingered in the air, a reminder of the craft that had built Sir Reginald Vane's fortune. Poirot sat behind a polished desk, his posture impeccable, his hands folded neatly before him. Captain Hastings stood by the window, gazing out at the festival's dwindling crowds, while Inspector Grange hovered near the door, his impatience evident in the tap of his boot. Thomas Finch, the apprentice, was summoned first. He entered with the hesitancy of a man stepping onto thin ice, his lanky frame seeming to shrink under the weight of Poirot's scrutiny. His sandy hair was disheveled, his ink-stained fingers twitching as he clutched the brim of his cap. He stood rather than sat, as if poised to flee, his pale eyes flitting between Poirot and the portrait of Sir Reginald on the wall a stern visage that seemed to watch him with disapproval. "Monsieur Finch," Poirot began, his voice soft but piercing, "you are the apprentice of Sir Reginald Vane. A position of trust, of learning. Tell me, how did you come to serve such a man?" His tone was conversational, but his eyes, sharp as cut glass, missed nothing. Finch cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. "I started 3 years ago, sir. My father was a watchmaker, taught me the basics. Sir Reginald took me on after father died, said I had a knack for gears." He paused, his fingers twisting the cap. "He was particular, but fair. Taught me everything I know." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching slightly. "And this workshop of yours, below the clock tower, is where you were at the time of the murder?" "Yes. Repairing a mantel clock, you said. A delicate task, requiring focus. Yet you heard nothing, no cry, no sound of violence." His question hung in the air, deceptively gentle. Finch's Adam's apple bobbed. "No, sir. The workshop's full of clocks, all ticking away, and the festival was loud music, voices. I was focused on the clock. Didn't hear a thing till the bell rang at 3:30. His words were rehearsed, delivered with a practiced earnestness. But Poirot noted the slight hesitation before "didn't hear a thing," as if the phrase had been chosen with care. "Most interesting," Poirot said, leaning forward. "And this clock you repaired, it was for a Mrs. Harrow, you say. She will confirm this, no doubt. But tell me, Monsieur Finch, your apronette was pristine when I saw you in the square. For a man working with oil and gears, this is unusual, Nan." Finch flushed, his hands tightening on the cap. "I told you, sir, I washed up before going out. Didn't want to look untidy at the festival." His voice rose slightly, defensive, and Poirot's smile was faint, almost imperceptible. "A fastidious apprentice," Poirot murmured. "Admirable. And yet, the oil on the clock tower's gears, it was fresh, applied with care. Your work, perhaps?" Finch nodded, a touch too eagerly. Sir, I oiled the mechanism yesterday. Sir Reginald was particular about the tower clock, said it was the heart of St. Aldwyn's." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The heart, indeed. And you, Monsieur Finch, you know this heart well, its gears, its levers, its secrets." He paused, letting the words settle. "Tell me, did Sir Reginald ever speak of his son, Edmund, or of his rival, Madame Cole? Were there tensions, disputes?" Finch hesitated, his eyes darting to the floor. He didn't talk much about personal things, but he'd argue with Miss Cole sometimes, about business. Called her stubborn, said she'd never match his craft. As for Mr. Edmund, he didn't mention him often, but when he did, it was cold, like he was ashamed. His voice faltered, and Poirot noted the flicker of unease, as if Finch feared he'd said too much. "And you, Monsieur Finch," Poirot continued, his tone sharpening, "you were content in your role, an apprentice, learning from a master, with no ambitions beyond the workshop." Finch's flush deepened, his fingers now mangling the cap. "I was grateful, sir. Sir Reginald gave me a chance when no one else would. I owed him everything." Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Gratitude is a powerful motive, but so is fear, or ambition. "You were skilled, Monsieur Finch. Perhaps you dreamed of more than an apprentice's lot." Finch's eyes widened, but he shook his head vehemently. "No, sir. I'd never hurt him." His voice cracked, and Poirot's expression remained unreadable. Hastings, turning from the window, interjected with his usual earnestness. "Come now, Poirot. The lad seems honest enough. His story holds clocks ticking, festival noise, and that bell at 3:30. Everyone heard it." Poirot's gaze flicked to Hastings, a spark of amusement in his eyes. "Mon ami, the bell is precisely what interests me. It is too perfect, too convenient. Inspector Grange, who had been silent, snorted. "You're chasing shadows, Mr. Poirot. The boy's alibi is solid. We've got witnesses who saw him leave the workshop after the bell. Let's not waste time on hunches." Poirot's smile was polite, but edged with steel. "Hunches, Inspector. Nan, I follow the little gray cells, and they tell me that Monsieur Finch's story, it is like a clock well crafted, but perhaps not ticking. True." He rose, gesturing for Finch to sit. "One moment, monsieur. I observe your hands stained with ink and oil, yet your nails are clean, as if scrubbed with care. And this cap you hold, it is worn, but its brim bears a faint mark, like a smear of grease, from the clock tower perhaps." Finch's hands froze, his eyes wide. I don't know what you mean, sir. I handle gears all the time, could be from anywhere." Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but his eyes told a different story. "Of course. You may go, Monsieur Finch, but remain in the manor. The truth, it has a way of catching up." Finch stumbled out, his cap clutched to his chest, leaving a faint scent of oil in his wake as the door closed. Hastings turned to Poirot, his brow furrowed. "You're hard on the lad, Poirot. He's nervous, but that's natural, isn't it? Being questioned about a murder?" Poirot adjusted his cufflinks, his expression serene. "Nervous, oui, but why? The innocent are nervous, but the guilty are precise. Monsieur Finch's story is too precise, like a clock set to deceive." Grange, flipping through his notebook, grunted. "I still say, the son's our man. That dust on his boots, and bad blood with his father, mark my words. He's hiding something." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Perhaps, Inspector, but the apprentice, he knows the clock tower's heart, and that heart, it beats with secrets. We shall see what ticks beneath." The study fell silent, save for the distant hum of the festival. Poirot's mind was already turning to the next interview. To Margaret Cole's sharp tongue and Edmund Vane's smoldering anger, but Finch's trembling hands, his pristine apron, his too perfect alibi lingered in Poirot's thoughts, like the faint tick of a clock counting down to the truth. Chapter 5. The rivals grudged the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky above St. Aldwyn's in hues of amber and violet, as Hercule Poirot made his way to Margaret Cole's clock shop. The festival's clamor had softened to a murmur, the square now dotted with lanterns that cast a warm glow over the cobblestones. The shop, a modest establishment wedged between a bakery and a tailor, stood apart from the festive cheer, its windows dark, save for a single lamp burning within. Poirot, his coat, immaculate despite the day's exertions, paused to adjust his hat before entering, Captain Hastings at his side, ever the faithful shadow. Inspector Grange had remained at the manor, grumbling about paperwork, leaving Poirot to pursue his inquiries with his characteristic precision. The bell above the door jingled as they stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and machine oil. Clocks lined the walls, their faces gleaming in the lamplight, each ticking in its own rhythm, a chorus of time that seemed to mock the frozen hands of the clock tower. Margaret Cole stood behind a workbench, her hands steady as she adjusted a delicate spring with a pair of tweezers. Her navy dress was unadorned, save for the silver watch-shaped brooch, its design catching Poirot's eye as a subtle echo of her craft. She looked up, her gray eyes sharp and unyielding, and set down her tools with deliberate care. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice crisp as the autumn air, "I expected you'd come poking about. What do you want?" Her tone held no warmth, only a challenge, as if she dared him to find fault in her domain. Poirot inclined his head, his mustache curving in a polite smile. "Madame Cole, I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my friend, Captain Hastings. We seek only the truth about the death of Sir Reginald Vane. You, I understand, were his rival in trade, a matter of some friction, Nan." He gestured to a chair, but she remained standing, her posture rigid, friction. She gave a short, bitter laugh. That's a polite way of putting it. Reginald Vane was a tyrant, undercutting my prices, stealing my customers with his fancy manner and his grand reputation. He didn't compete, he crushed. Her hands rested on the workbench, fingers splayed, as if anchoring herself against the tide of her own resentment. Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. A tyrant, you say? And yet, you prospered, madame. Your clocks, they are exquisite, crafted with a skill that rivals even Sir Reginald's. But tell me, where were you at 3:17 this afternoon, when he met his end? His voice was gentle, but the question was a needle, probing for a reaction. Margaret's eyes narrowed, but she answered without hesitation. At my stall, selling my work. The festival's a busy time. People want pocket watches, mantel clocks. I was there all afternoon, as any villager can tell you. Her words were firm, but Poirot noted a slight tightening of her lips, a flicker of caution in her gaze. Indeed, he said, stepping closer to the workbench, his gloved fingers brushing the air above a half-assembled clock. And yet, madame, there is a gap in your story, a small one, but significant. Between 3 o'clock and 20 minutes past, no one recalls seeing you at your stall. A curious absence, for a woman so busy. He paused, his eyes locking with hers. Where were you, Madame Cole? Her jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. I stepped away to fetch more stock from the shop. It's just across the square, not far. I was back before the bell rang at 3:30. She folded her arms, the brooch glinting as she moved. You're fishing, Mr. Poirot. I had no reason to kill him. His death doesn't bring my customers back. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps not, madame. But rivalry, it is a fire that burns deep. And this vial, he gestured to, a small glass bottle on the workbench, filled with a clear, viscous liquid. It contains oil, identical to that found on the Clocktower's gears. A coincidence, perhaps. His tone was light, but his eyes were unrelenting. Margaret's expression hardened. It's clock oil, Mr. Poirot. Every clockmaker uses it. You'll find the same in any workshop, including Sir Reginald's. It proves nothing. She picked up the vial, holding it up to the light, as if to dismiss his insinuation. If you're looking for a killer, try his son. Edmund's got a temper and a grudge as old as these hills. Poirot's gaze lingered on the vial, noting its label, worn but legible, matching the brand found in the clock tower. Most interesting, he murmured. And yet, madame, you knew Sir Reginald well, did you not? His methods, his workshop, perhaps even his clock tower. He stepped to a shelf, examining a row of tools, screwdrivers, pliers, a small hammer, all meticulously arranged. You are a woman of precision, a woman who plans. Her eyes flashed, but she held her ground. I know my trade, if that's what you mean. And yes, I knew Reginald's ways arrogant, secretive, but I didn't need to kill him to best him. My work speaks for itself. She gestured to a clock on the wall, its face inlaid with mother-of-pearl, its tick steady and true. That's my revenge outlasting him. Hastings, who had been silent, shifted uncomfortably. She's got a point, Poirot. Her business is thriving, and she was at the festival. Sounds like a solid alibi to me. Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes still on Margaret. An alibi, mon ami, is like a clock. It appears to tell the truth, but only if its mechanism is sound. And this mechanism, it has a flaw. He turned back to Margaret, his voice softening. Madame, you speak of Sir Reginald's arrogance, his secrecy. Did he ever share with you the workings of the clock tower, its peculiarities? His question was deliberate, probing for a reaction, but Margaret's face remained impassive. She shook her head. He guarded that place like a dragon its hoard. Only his apprentice was allowed up there, and even then, under his watch. If you're looking for secrets, ask young Finch. He's the one who oiled those gears. Her tone was dismissive, but Poirot caught a fleeting glance toward the door, as if she expected someone to overhear. "Very well," Poirot said, stepping back. "You have been most helpful, Madame Cole. For now, I ask that you remain in St. Aldwyn's. The truth, it has a way of ticking to the surface." He gestured to the door, and Margaret hesitated, her eyes searching his face for a moment before she nodded curtly and left, the bell jingling in her wake. As the door closed, Hastings turned to Poirot, his brow furrowed. "You're awfully suspicious of her, Poirot, but her story checks out. People saw her at the stall, and that oil's common enough. Why push her so hard?" Poirot adjusted his gloves, his expression serene but his eyes alight with calculation. "Mon ami, it is not the oil itself, but its presence in the clock tower. So fresh, so precise. And Madame Cole, she is a woman of control, yet her control faltered for those 20 minutes. Why?" He moved to the workbench, examining the tools once more. A small screwdriver, its handle worn, caught his attention. Its tip bore a faint scratch, as if used on something harder than wood. "This," he murmured, holding it up to the light. "It is a tool for delicate work, but also for other purposes." He set it down, his mind turning to the clock tower's misaligned cog, the fresh oil, the locked door. Margaret Cole's grudge was clear, but was it motive enough for murder? Or was she like Finch, hiding a deeper truth? Outside, the festival. Lanterns swayed in the evening breeze, their light dancing on the shop's windows. Poirot's thoughts returned to the clock tower, its frozen hands a silent challenge. Margaret Cole's story, like Finch's, was too neat, too polished. And yet, the truth lay not in their words, but in the gaps between them. With Hastings trailing behind, Poirot stepped into the night, the tick of Margaret's clocks fading, as he prepared to confront the next piece of the puzzle, Edmund Vane, the prodigal son. Chapter 6. The prodigal son. The evening air, in St. Aldwyn's, carried a chill. The festival's lanterns now flickering like fireflies against the gathering dusk. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings walked through the manor's sprawling garden, where the scent of late roses mingled with the faint temps of cigarette smoke. Edmund Vane, Sir Reginald's estranged son, leaned against a weathered stone bench, his silhouette sharp against the twilight. A cigarette glowed between his fingers, its tip flaring with each slow drag. His dark coat was rumpled, his face shadowed by a scowl that seemed etched into his features, a map of old grievances. Poirot, his polished shoes crunching softly on the gravel path, approached with the measured grace of a man who knew the power of silence. Hastings, ever the contrast, adjusted his tie nervously, his honest face betraying his discomfort with the brooding figure before them. "Monsieur Vane," Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet, "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We seek to understand the tragedy that has befallen your father. You will permit us a few questions. We—" His tone was courteous, but his eyes, sharp and unyielding, fixed on Edmund's face, noting the faint tremor in the hand-holding. The cigarette. Edmund exhaled a plume of smoke, his lips curling into a sneer. "Ask away, Mr. Poirot, but don't expect me to weep for the old man. He was no father to me." His voice was low, laced with a bitterness that seemed to seep from his very bones. He flicked ash onto the gravel, his eyes glinting with defiance. Poirot inclined his head, undeterred. "You speak with candor, monsieur. A son estranged, returning to St. Aldwyn's after many years. Why now? What brought you back to the shadow of your father's clock tower?" His question was precise, a surgeon's scalpel probing for the truth. Edmund's jaw tightened, but he answered, his words clipped. "I heard he was ill. Thought it was time to settle things money, mostly. He owed me that much after cutting me off." He took another drag, the smoke curling upward, like a ghost of his resentment. 10 years ago, he called me a disgrace, threw me out over a scandal that wasn't my fault. I came back to claim my share before he could give it all to that sniveling apprentice or some charity. Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze dropping to Edmund's boots, where a faint dusting of gray clung to the leather dust that matched the clock tower's floor. Most interesting, he said softly. And where were you, Monsieur Vane, at 3:17 this afternoon, when your father's life was ended by a dagger? His voice was calm, but the question carried a weight that made Hastings shift uneasily. Edmund shrugged, his nonchalance almost too practiced. At the Red Lion, drowning my sorrows. Ask the barkeep, Tompkins. He'll tell you I was there, pint in hand. His eyes flicked to Poirot, daring him to challenge the claim. But Poirot's expression remained serene. Indeed, Poirot said, stepping closer, his gaze lingering on the cigarette. And yet, your boots, monsieur, they carry the dust of a place not found in an inn. The clock tower, perhaps. Its floor is distinctive, none. He gestured to the boots, his tone light, but pointed. Edmund's eyes narrowed, but he didn't flinch. I've been walking all over this blasted town. Dust is dust, Mr. Poirot. You're seeing things that aren't there. He stubbed out his cigarette on the bench, grinding it with more force than necessary. Poirot noted the gesture, the controlled anger in it, and filed it away in his mind. Perhaps, Poirot said, his smile faint. But the eyes of Hercule Poirot, they see much. Tell me, monsieur, did you ever visit the clock tower, as a boy, perhaps, or since your return? His question was casual, but his eyes were unrelenting. Searching Edmund's face for the slightest crack, Edmund hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second, before shaking his head. Not since I was a lad. Father kept that place locked tighter than a vault. Said it was his sanctuary, no place for a wastrel like me. His voice dripped with sarcasm, but Poirot caught a flicker of something else, regret, perhaps, or a buried memory. And the dagger, Poirot continued, his tone unchanged. The one that ended your father's life, it bore a crest, a family emblem. You recognize it, oui? He watched Edmund closely, noting the slight stiffening of his shoulders. Edmund's lips twitched, but he shook his head again. Haven't seen it in years. Probably some heirloom he kept in the manor. You'd do better asking Finch, he was, always poking around father's things. His deflection was smooth, but Poirot's gray cells were already turning, piecing together the puzzle of Edmund's return, his dust-covered boots, his too casual alibi. Hastings, unable to contain himself, stepped forward. Look here, Poirot, the man says he was at the pub. Tompkins will confirm it, surely. And bad blood with his father doesn't make him a killer. His voice was earnest, but Poirot's raised hand silenced him. Mon ami, Poirot said, his eyes never leaving Edmund. An alibi is only as strong as its weakest link, and Monsieur Vane's link, it is fragile. He turned back to Edmund, his voice softening. You returned. For money, you say. But perhaps also for reconciliation. Or for revenge. The heart, it is a complicated machine. Edmund's eyes flashed, but he held his ground. Revenge. I didn't need a dagger for that. I'd have taken him to court, bled him dry legally. But murder, that's not my style. He lit another cigarette, his hand steady now, as if the act grounded him. Poirot noted the shift, the way Edmund's defiance masked a deeper unease. Very well, Poirot said, stepping back. You may go, Monsieur Vane, but remain in St. Aldwyn's. The truth, it has a way of catching even those who run. Edmund gave a curt nod, his cigarette glowing as he turned and strode into the garden's shadows, leaving a trail of smoke behind. As Edmund disappeared, Hastings turned to Poirot, his brow furrowed. You're awfully hard on him, Poirot. He's bitter, yes, but that dust could be from anywhere, and the barkeep's word should count for something. Poirot adjusted his coat, his expression serene, but his eyes alight with calculation. Mon ami, he said, the dust is not just dust. It is a signature, a whisper from the clock tower. And Monsieur Vane, he speaks of money, but his heart speaks of pain. Pain is a motive, Hastings, as powerful as greed. He paused, his gaze drifting to the manor, where the lights of the drawing-room glowed faintly. The dagger, the dust, the alibi there, pieces of a machine, and I, Hercule Poirot, will find how they fit. The garden was quiet now, save for the distant hum of the festival's last revelers. Poirot's mind turned to the clock tower, its frozen hands a silent challenge. Edmund Vane's story, like those of Finch and Cole, was a carefully crafted facade. But beneath it lay cracks that Poirot's little gray cells would widen until the truth spilled forth. With Hastings at his side, he walked back to the manor, the night closing in around them, the puzzle of Sir Reginald's murder growing ever more intricate. Chapter 7. The clocks, secret. The clock tower of St. Aldwyn's stood silhouetted against the starlit sky, its bronze face a pale glimmer in the darkness. Hercule Poirot, his coat buttoned against the evening chill, ascended the spiral staircase. Once more, a lantern in one gloved hand, casting flickering shadows on the stone walls. Captain Hastings followed, his breath visible in the cool air, his face a mixture of curiosity and unease. The festival had ended, the square below now silent, save for the occasional creak of a cart or the bark of a distant dog. The tower, however, seemed alive, its great mechanism ticking faintly, as if guarding secrets it was not yet ready to reveal. Poirot's purpose was clear, to interrogate the clock itself, for he was certain it held the key to Sir Reginald Vane's murder at the summit. The chamber was as they had left it, though the body had been removed by Inspector Grange's men. The dust on the floor remained undisturbed, save for the faint outline where Sir Reginald had fallen. The dagger, now in the constable's care, was absent, but its image lingered in Poirot's mind, its silver hilt, the Vane family crest, a silent accusation. The great gears loomed overhead, their iron teeth meshed with a precision that spoke of the victim's genius. Poirot set the lantern on the wooden stool, its light illuminating the mechanism's intricate dance. He stood motionless for a moment, his head tilted, as if listening to the clock's heartbeat. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, his voice low but resonant. "This clock, it is more than a machine. It is a witness, perhaps even an accomplice." Its hand stopped at 3:17, the moment of the murder, yet the festival bell rang at 3:30. Why this discrepancy? His eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with the thrill of the puzzle. Hastings frowned, peering at the gears. Perhaps it broke down, or the killer stopped it deliberately, to mark the time. His tone was earnest, but Poirot shook his head, his gloved finger tracing the air above a cog. "Nan, Hastings. A clock of this craftsmanship does not break without cause, and to stop it requires knowledge, intimate knowledge." He stepped closer, his lantern casting long shadows across the mechanism. His eyes narrowed as he examined a small brass lever, its surface polished to a mirror-like sheen. "This lever," he murmured, "it controls the chime. But see here," he pointed, to a faint scratch on the lever's base, barely visible. "It has been adjusted, recently, with great care." He moved to the main gear, his fingers hovering over its teeth. The oil, fresh and glistening, caught the light, its scent sharp in the confined space. But something else caught Poirot's attention, a cog, slightly misaligned, its teeth not quite meshed with its neighbor. He leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "This cog," he said, "it has been tampered with. Not enough to stop the clock, but enough to alter its rhythm. Someone wished the clock to speak a lie." Hastings, puzzled, scratched his head. "A lie? You mean the time of death? But why bother? Everyone knows Sir Reginald was killed around 3:17, the doctor confirmed it." Poirot's smile was enigmatic, his gaze still fixed on the cog. "The doctor confirms the body, mon ami, but the clock confirms the killer's intent. This adjustment, it is no accident. It is a signature. He stepped back, his mind racing. The clock's chime, set to ring at 3:30 for the festival, had been reset to 3:17, the exact moment of the murder. This was no coincidence. It was a deliberate act designed to create an illusion. But whose illusion? Finch, with his ink-stained fingers and intimate knowledge of the mechanism. Cole, whose own workshop held the same oil. Or Edmund, whose dusty boots whispered of the tower. Poirot's gray cells churned, piecing together the fragments. He turned to the narrow window, its arched frame admitting a sliver of moonlight. The drop below was sheer, the tower's wall smooth as glass. No escape there, yet the killer had vanished from a locked room. Poirot's gaze returned to the door, its heavy oak unmarred by force, the key found in Sir Reginald's pocket. The lock, he murmured, it is too perfect. A locked room is not a fortress, it is a stage. Hastings, catching the thread of Poirot's thought, ventured a guess. You think the killer staged it to look impossible? But how? The door was locked, the key in his pocket. Unless, he hesitated, his eyes widening, unless there's another way in or out. Poirot's smile widened, a rare glint of approval in his eyes. Bravo, Hastings. You begin to see. The clock tower, it holds secrets beyond its gears. He moved to the wall behind the mechanism, his lantern casting light on the stone. His fingers brushed the surface, searching for irregularities. Near the base of the largest gear, he paused, his gloved hand pressing against a seam so faint it was nearly invisible. A soft click echoed in the chamber, and a narrow panel shifted, revealing a sliver of darkness, a hidden passage. Hastings gasped. Good heavens, Poirot, a secret door. He stepped forward, peering into the narrow space. But Poirot raised a hand, his expression cautious. Careful, mon ami. This passage, it is old, but its hinges are oiled, recently used. See here, he pointed to a faint smear of grease on the panel's edge, matching the oil on the gears. The killer knew this secret, used it to enter, to kill, to escape. And then, they locked the door, leaving the key to mislead us. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with the thrill of discovery. The passage, barely wide enough for a man, descended into darkness, its stone walls damp and cold. Poirot shone his lantern inside, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward. It leads, I suspect, to the base of the tower, he said. A hidden exit, concealed from all but those who know the clock tower's heart. Hastings, still reeling, shook his head. But who would know about this? Finch. Perhaps he worked on the clock. Or Cole, with her knowledge of mechanisms. Surely not Edmund, he's been gone for years. Poirot's gaze was distant, his mind already turning to the suspects. Knowledge, Hastings, is not enough. Motive, opportunity, audacity, these are the gears of murder. The apprentice, the rival, the Sunich, could know this passage, but only one used it. He closed the panel, its click echoing like a verdict. We must learn who had reason to climb these hidden stairs, to wield the dagger, to tamper with the clock. He turned back to the mechanism, his lantern illuminating the misaligned cog. This clock, he said, it was set to chime at 3:17, not 3:30. A false alibi, perhaps, to place the killer elsewhere when the murder occurred. But whose alibi? We shall see. He adjusted his hat, his expression serene but his mind a whirl of calculations, as they descended the tower. The night air greeted them, crisp and heavy with the scent of autumn leaves. Hastings, his mind racing, ventured another question. Poirot, this passage changes everything. The locked room isn't locked anymore. But how do we know who used it? Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes gleaming in the lantern's light. Mon ami, the passage is but a path. The true trail is in the hearts of our suspects, their fears, their desires, their lies. The clock has spoken, and now, Hercule Poirot. Well, listen. They stepped into the silent square, the tower looming behind them, its secrets no longer entirely its own. The puzzle was clearer now, but the final piece, the killer's identity, remained just out of reach, ticking closer with every moment. Chapter 8. The Hidden Passage. The moon hung low over St. Aldwyn's, casting a silvery glow across the silent festival square, now empty of its revelers. Hercule Poirot, his lantern swinging gently in his gloved hand, stood at the base of the clock tower, its looming silhouette a monument to the secrets it held. Captain Hastings, his coat collar turned up against the night's chill, followed closely, his breath forming faint clouds in the air. The discovery of the hidden passage had shifted the puzzle of Sir Reginald Vane's murder, transforming the impossible into the merely improbable. Poirot's mind, ever precise, churned with the implications of this concealed staircase. Its oiled hinges, a silent testament to a killer's cunning. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice a soft murmur in the quiet. This passage, it is the key to the locked room, but a key is useless without knowing who turned it. He led the way to the tower's base, where a low ivy-covered door, barely noticeable among the weathered stones, marked the passage's exit. The door was flush with the wall, its edges blending seamlessly into the masonry, a craftsman's secret hidden in plain sight. Poirot knelt, his lantern illuminating a faint scratch on the lock, fresh and gleaming. Hastings peered over his shoulder, his eyes wide. Good Lord, Poirot, it's practically invisible. No wonder Grange's men missed it. But who could have known about this? It's not exactly common knowledge. His voice carried a mix of awe and frustration, the complexity of the case weighing on his straightforward nature. Poirot rose, dusting his gloves with a handkerchief. Who, indeed? The clock tower is old, Hastings, but its secrets are not. This passage, it was used recently. See the oil, the scratches. Someone with intimate knowledge of the tower, someone trusted, or someone curious. His eyes gleamed, reflecting the lantern's light. The apprentice, the rival, the son, one of them walked these steps, and I, Hercule Poirot, will learn who. They returned to the tower's summit, the spiral staircase creaking under their steps. The chamber was as before, its great gears silent now, the dust undisturbed, save for the constable's earlier intrusion. Poirot set the lantern on the stool, its light casting long shadows across the mechanism. He approached the hidden panel. It seemed barely visible behind the largest gear. With a gentle press, it clicked open, revealing the narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air within was damp, carrying the scent of stone and earth. But the hinges, as Poirot had noted, were slick with fresh oil. He shone the lantern into the passage, its beam illuminating rough-hewn steps that spiraled downward. This, he said, is how the killer entered and exited, locking the door from within to create the illusion of impossibility. The key in Sir Reginald's pocket was a distraction, a prop in their charade. He pointed to a faint smudge on the passage's wall, a trace of grease that matched the oil on the gears. The killer was careful, but not careful enough. Hastings, peering into the darkness, shivered. It's like something out of a Gothic novel, Poirot. A secret passage, a locked room, a dagger with a family crest, makes my head spin. But surely only someone close to Sir Reginald would know about this. Finch, maybe. He worked on the clock. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. Oui, Monsieur Finch has the knowledge, the access. But so might Madame Cole, with her skill in mechanisms. And Monsieur Vane, the son, he was a boy here once, playing in his father's domain. A child remembers hidden places. He closed the panel, its click echoing in the chamber. We must consider not only who knew, but who had reason to use this path. He turned to the gears, his eyes lingering on the misaligned cog he had noticed earlier. The clock, he murmured. It was set to chime at 3:17, not 3:30, as the festival required. This was no error, was a deliberate act, to place the killer elsewhere at the moment of death. He traced the cog's edge with a gloved finger, noting its slight deviation. The killer adjusted the mechanism, knowing it would chime to support their alibi. But whose? Hastings, trying to keep up, ventured a guess. Finch, surely. He's the one who oiled the gears, who knew the clock inside out. And that clean apron of his, it's suspicious, isn't it? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. Suspicious, oui, but not conclusive. Madame Cole's workshop holds the same oil, and her absence from the stall at 317 is unexplained. Monsieur Vane's boots carry the dust of this tower, yet his alibi at the inn is vague. Each has a piece of the puzzle, Hastings, but only one holds the whole. He stepped back, his gaze sweeping the chamber. The narrow window, the locked door, the hidden passage, they formed a stage, meticulously set for murder. Poirot moved to the stool, its surface still bearing the faint smear of oil he had observed earlier. This stool, he said. It was not used by Sir Reginald. He was tall, his work at eye level, but someone shorter, perhaps, stood here, tampering with the gears. He glanced at Hastings, his eyes alight with calculation. Monsieur Finch is tall, like his master. Madame Cole is shorter, as is Monsieur Vane, a small detail, but significant. He knelt by the door, examining the lock once more. The key, now with the constable, had been clean, unmarred by blood or dust, a detail that nagged at Poirot's mind. The key, he said, it was placed in Sir Reginald's pocket after the murder, to complete the illusion. But why? To make us believe no one could have left, or to point us to someone specific. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, as if speaking to the clock itself. Hastings, growing restless, paced the chamber. It's all so convoluted, Poirot. The passage, the clock, the key. How do we sort it out? And what about the dagger? That crest must mean something. Poirot nodded, his mind already turning to the weapon. Its filigree hilt, a link to the Vane family's past. The dagger, oui, it is a clue, but not yet clear. It bears the family crest, yet none admit to owning it. An heirloom, perhaps, stolen, or hidden. He paused, his eyes distant. We must search the manor, Hastings. The dagger's origin, the passage's use, the clock's lie, they are threads in a tapestry, and I shall weave them together. As they descended the tower, the night air greeted them, crisp and heavy, with the scent of dew. The festival square was empty now, its lanterns extinguished, but the clock tower loomed behind. Its secrets partially revealed, yet still elusive. Poirot's mind was a whirl of connections, Finch's nervous hands, Cole's unexplained absence, Edmund's dusty boots, and now the hidden passage, a path to murder. Each suspect had the means, but the motive remained shrouded, ticking closer with every moment. Tomorrow, Poirot said, his voice firm. We speak again to our suspects, and we search the manor. The truth, it hides, but not for long. Hercule Poirot will find it. Hastings nodded, his faith in his friend unshaken, as they walked into the night, the clock tower's shadow stretching long behind them. Chapter 9. The motive unraveled. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Vane Manor's library, casting a golden glow across rows of leather-bound books and the polished mahogany table where Hercule Poirot had assembled the suspects. The room, with its high ceilings and heavy drapes, carried an air of solemnity, as if the very walls held their breath for the revelations to come. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small frame commanding despite its size, his mustache immaculate, his eyes bright with the clarity of a man who had glimpsed the truth. Captain Hastings sat to one side, his notebook open, his pen poised, while Inspector Grange, his face set in a skeptical frown, leaned against a bookcase, arms crossed. The three suspects, Samus Finch, Margaret Cole, and Edmund Vane sat in uneasy silence, their expressions a mix of apprehension and defiance. Poirot's gaze swept over them, lingering on each face, Finch's pale, twitching features, Cole's sharp, guarded eyes, Edmund's brooding scowl, a cigarette smoldering. Between his fingers, the air was thick with tension, the faint tick of a mantel clock, the only sound breaking the stillness. Madame et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice smooth but resonant. We are gathered to unravel the mystery of Sir Reginald Vane's murder, crime of precision, of audacity, committed in a locked tower, with a dagger bearing the Vane family crest, the clock, the passage, the key they have spoken, and now Hercule Poirot will reveal their meaning. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes never leaving the suspects. Let us begin with the facts. Sir Reginald was stabbed at 3:17 p.m., the clock's hands frozen to mark the moment. The room was locked, the key in his pocket, yet a hidden passage allowed entry and exit. The clock's chime, set for 3:30, was altered to ring at 3:17, a deliberate act to create an alibi. But for whom? He paused, letting the question hang, noting the slight shift in Finch's posture, the tightening of Cole's lips, the flick of Edmund's cigarette. He turned to Finch first, his voice deceptively gentle. Monsieur Finch, you are the apprentice, trusted with the Clocktower's care. You oiled its gears, knew its secrets, including the hidden passage. Your alibi is the workshop, where clocks ticked in unison, yet your apron was pristine, your hands too clean for a man at work. Why, monsieur, did you wash so thoroughly before joining the festival? Finch's eyes widened, his fingers twisting the edge of his jacket. I told you, sir, I didn't want to look untidy. I was in the workshop, fixing Mrs. Harrow's clock. I didn't. Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. Your story, it is precise, but it lacks truth. The oil on the passage's hinges, it matches that in your workshop, and the clock's cog, misaligned to chime at 3:17, it required skill. Your skill? Finch's face paled, but he shook his head, his voice a whisper. I didn't kill him. I owed him everything. Poirot turned to Margaret Cole, whose gray eyes met his with a spark of defiance. Madame Cole, your rivalry with Sir Reginald was fierce. He stole your clients, diminished your trade, yet your stall was unattended from 3 o'clock to 3:20, a gap, you explain with a vague errand. And the oil in your shop, it is identical to that in the clock tower. You are a woman of precision, madame, capable of adjusting a clock, of knowing its secrets. Her jaw tightened, but her voice was steady. I told you, Mr. Poirot, I was fetching stock, and that oil is common, every clockmaker uses it. You've no proof. Poirot's smile was faint. Proof, madame, is in the details. Your brooch, shaped like a watch, it is a symbol of your craft, but also of your ambition. Did Sir Reginald? Success threatened that ambition too greatly. She scoffed, folding her arms. I didn't need to kill him to prove myself. My clocks outlast his. Finally, Poirot faced Edmund Vane, whose cigarette burned low, its ash falling unnoticed to the floor. Monsieur Vane, the prodigal son, returned to claim your inheritance. Your boots carry the dust of the clock tower. Your alibi at the Red Lion is vague, supported only by a barkeep's hazy memory. The dagger, with your family crest, did it call to you, a symbol of what you were denied? Edmund's eyes narrowed, his voice low and bitter. I told you, I was drinking, and that dagger. Father kept it in his study, locked away. I hadn't seen it in years. Poirot stepped to the center of the room, his presence commanding silence. Each of you has motive, opportunity, knowledge, but only one had the audacity to weave this crime, and now I reveal the heart of the matter. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. Sir Reginald, I have learned, changed his will 2 weeks ago. He named not his son, but his apprentice, Thomas Finch, as his heir. This Mies Amos is the spark that lit the fire. Finch gasped, his face ashen. That's not true. He never told me. but Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Oh, but it is true, Monsieur Finch. I found the draft in the Manor's study, hidden in a locked drawer," Sir Reginald confided in his solicitor, fearing his son's return might disrupt his plans. "You, Monsieur Finch, knew of this change, or suspected it. You feared he might reconsider, restore Edmund, or give his fortune elsewhere, and so, you acted." Finch shook his head, his voice rising. "No, I'd never. I was loyal." Poirot's voice cut through, calm but unyielding. "Loyalty, monsieur, can be to a fortune, not a man. You used the hidden passage, known to you from your work. You stabbed Sir Reginald with the family dagger, stolen from the manor, to cast suspicion on Edmund. You adjusted the clock to chime at 3:17, creating the illusion you were in the workshop when the murder occurred. The key, placed in his pocket, was your final touch a locked room to baffle us." Cole's eyes widened, but she remained silent, her hands clenched. Edmund stubbed out his cigarette, his face unreadable. Poirot continued, his voice a steady rhythm. "The dust on Monsieur Vane's boots places him in the tower, but his anger is too raw, too uncalculated for such a plan. Madame Cole's absence is suspicious, but her mode of rivalry lacks the personal fire of inheritance. You, Monsieur Finch, had the means, the motive, the moment." Finch's shoulders slumped, his voice barely a whisper. "You can't prove it." Poirot's smile was almost pitying. "The proof, monsieur, is in the clock. Its cog, misaligned by your hand, bears a scratch from your screwdriver, found in your workshop. The oil on the passage, it matches your vial, not Madame Cole's. And your apron, so clean it, was not tidiness, but necessity, to hide the blood." The room was silent, the mantel clock's tick deafening. Hastings, his pen frozen, stared at Poirot, while Grange's skepticism gave way to grudging respect. Finch's face crumpled, his hands trembling. "I only wanted what was mine," he whispered, the confession breaking like a dam. Poirot nodded, his expression solemn. "The truth, it always ticks to the surface. You will explain to Inspector Grange, Monsieur Finch." He turned to Hastings, his voice soft. "The puzzle is nearly complete, mon ami. But the dagger's origin, it still whispers. We must confirm its tale." As Grange led Finch away, the library felt emptier, the weight of the revelation settling like dust. Poirot's gray cells, however, were still at work, piecing together the final threads of the Clocktower's deadly secret. Chapter 10. The Alibi's Floth. A library of Vane Manor, bathed in the soft glow of morning light, retained an air of quiet expectancy, as though the very books on its shelves awaited the final act of the drama unfolding within. Hercule Poirot stood by the tall windows, his silhouette sharp against the pale curtains, his hands clasped behind his back, his mustache perfectly symmetrical. The revelation of Thomas Finch's motive had shifted the puzzle of Sir Reginald Vane's murder, but Poirot's grey cells were not yet at rest. The clock on the mantel ticked with relentless precision, a reminder that time, though manipulated by the killer, would yield to truth under Poirot's scrutiny. Captain Hastings sat at the mahogany table, his notebook filled with hurried scrawls, his face a mixture of awe and impatience. Inspector Grange, his skepticism now tempered by Poirot's earlier triumph, stood near the door, his arms crossed, ready to act on the detective's next move. Poirot turned from the window, his eyes bright with the clarity of a man who had seen the puzzle's final piece. "Mies Amos," he began, his voice a measured cadence. "The murder of Sir Reginald Vane is a clockwork crime, intricate and deliberate. The hidden passage, the tampered gears, the dagger with the Vane crest, they are parts of a mechanism designed to deceive. But every mechanism has a flaw, and today, Hercule Poirot will expose it." He gestured to the empty chair where Thomas Finch had sat, its vacancy a silent testament to his confession. "Monsieur Finch has admitted his fear that Sir Reginald Newell, naming him heir, might be undone. But let us examine the alibi, the heart of his deception. He claims he was in the workshop below the clock tower, repairing a mantel clock, until the festival bell rang at 3:30. Yet the clock tower chimed at 3:17. The moment of the murder. This Ms. Amos is no coincidence, it is the flaw. Hastings leaned forward, his brow furrowed. But Poirot, he's confessed, hasn't he? Said he was afraid of losing the inheritance. Why dig into the alibi now? Poirot's smile was faint, his eyes gleaming with purpose. Mon ami, a confession is not the truth until it fits every cog of the machine. Monsieur Finch's story. It is like a clock that runs too fast. It must be tested. Poirot paced slowly, his hands gesturing as if assembling the puzzle in the air. Consider the facts. The clock tower's mechanism was altered to chime at 3:17, not 3:30, as the festival required. This required skill, intimate knowledge of the gears. Monsieur Finch, as apprentice, possessed such skill. He used the hidden passage, known to him from his work, to enter the tower unseen. He stabbed Sir Reginald with the family dagger, stolen from the manor's study, to implicate Monsieur Edmund. He then adjusted the clock to chime at 3:17, creating the illusion he was in the workshop when the murder occurred. The key, placed in Sir Reginald's pocket, completed the locked room illusion. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. But the flaw, it lies in the workshop's clocks. Monsieur Finch claims they ticked in unison, synchronized to the tower's mechanism, proving he was there when the bell rang at 3:30. Yet I visited the workshop this morning, with Inspector Grange's permission. He nodded to Grange, who grunted in acknowledgement. The clocks, they are indeed synchronized, but to a master clock, set by Monsieur Finch himself. He could have altered it, just as he altered the tower's chime, to support his alibi. Grange shifted, his skepticism resurfacing. That's a stretch, Mr. Poirot. The lads admitted it, fear of losing the inheritance, used the passage, tampered with the clock. Why complicate things? Poirot's mustache twitched, his expression serene but unyielding. Complicate, Inspector. Nan, I simplify. The truth is a machine, and every part must fit. The workshop clocks, they are Monsieur Finch's creation, his alibi's foundation. But they are false witnesses, set to lie. Poirot stepped to the table, where a small object lay, a screwdriver, its handle worn, its tip bearing a faint scratch. This, he said, holding it up, was found in the workshop. Its tip matches the scratch on the clock tower's misaligned cog. Monsieur Finch, you used this to adjust the chime, did you not? He turned to the empty chair, as if addressing Finch directly, though the apprentice was now in Grange's custody. You thought it clever to make the clock speak for you, but the clock, it betrays you. Hastings, his pen hovering, shook his head. It's devilishly clever, Poirot, but how did you know? The passage, the clocks, the screwdriver, it's all so intricate. Poirot's eyes twinkled, a rare moment of indulgence. The little gray cells, mon ami, they see what the eyes miss. The oil on the passage's hinges, identical to that in Finch's workshop. The clean apron, washed not for tidiness, but to hide blood. And the screwdriver, it scratch a signature of guilt. He turned to Grange, his voice firm. Inspector, you will find, upon examining Monsieur Finch's lodgings, a cloth or garment bearing traces of blood, hidden or discarded, and the manor's study, where the dagger was kept, its lock, was picked, a skill Monsieur Finch learned in his trade. These will confirm his guilt beyond doubt. Grange nodded, his reluctance giving way to respect. I'll have my men search his rooms, and the study. If there's blood, or a picked lock, we'll find it. He hesitated, then added, You've a knack for this, Mr. Poirot. Never seen anything like it. Poirot inclined his head, his humility tinged with pride. It is merely method, Inspector. The truth, it is like a clock, each part must align, or it fails. He turned to Hastings, his expression softening. But one question remains, mon ami. The dagger, why choose it? To implicate Edmund, oui, but its presence in the manor suggests another layer, a personal touch. We must ensure no threads are left untied. The library was quiet, the mantel clock's tick a steady reminder of time's passage. Poirot's mind, however, was already moving forward, to the final confirmation of Finch's guilt and the closing of the case. The Clocktower's secrets had been laid bare, its chime, a false note, and a murderer's symphony. As Grange prepared to depart, Poirot's gaze lingered on the window, where the Clocktower stood in the distance, its hands now moving again, freed from the lie that had bound them. "Come, Hastings," he said, adjusting his hat. "We have seen the flaw, and soon the world will see the truth. The clock ticks on, and so does justice." With that, they stepped into the manor's hall, the puzzle nearly complete, but Poirot's vigilance unyielding until the final tick. Chapter 11. The confession. The air in Vane Manor's study was heavy with the scent of old leather and wax, the morning light filtering through the leaded windows to cast a muted glow across the room. Hercule Poirot stood before a towering bookcase, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on a small, ornate box that had once held the dagger bearing the Vane family crest. The room was quieter now, the absence of the suspects lending it an almost reverent stillness, broken only by the faint tick of a wall clock, a reminder of the case's heart. Captain Hastings sat at a writing desk, his face a mix of anticipation and exhaustion, his notebook filled with the twists of Poirot's deductions. Inspector Grange, his usual gruffness softened by the weight of recent events, stood near the door, holding a small bundle of evidence wrapped in cloth, a discovery that promised to seal the case. Thomas Finch, the apprentice, sat in a high-backed chair, his lanky frame hunched, his ink-stained hands trembling in his lap. The bravado he had clung to in the library had crumbled, replaced by a pallor that spoke of sleepless nights and the burden of guilt. His eyes, once darting with nervous energy, now fixed on the floor, avoiding Poirot's piercing gaze. The screwdriver, the tampered clock, the hidden passage, all had pointed to him, and Poirot's relentless logic had stripped away his defenses. "Monsieur Finch," Poirot began, his voice a calm, unyielding force. "You have heard the evidence, the oil on the passage's hinges, matching your workshop, the screwdriver, its scratch etched into the Clocktower's cog, the clean apron, hiding the blood of your crime, the will, naming you heir, was your motive, your fear that Sir Reginald might change it again. You used the hidden passage, stabbed him with the family dagger, and set the clock to chime at 3:17, crafting an alibi you thought unbreakable. But the truth, it is like time, it cannot be stopped." Finch's shoulders shook, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want to kill him. I couldn't lose it all." He lifted his eyes, red-rimmed and desperate, meeting Poirot's for the first time. "He took me in, taught me everything, said I was like a son. But then Edmund came back, sniffing around, and I heard him talking to the solicitor about changing the will, maybe giving it all to charity. I panicked." Poirot nodded, his expression solemn but not unkind. "Panic, monsieur, is a poor counselor. You chose the dagger, stolen from this very study, to cast suspicion on Monsieur Edmund. A clever touch, but too clever. The lock on the box, it was picked, a skill you learned in your trade. He gestured to the ornate box, its lock bearing faint scratches, invisible to the untrained eye, but glaring to Poirot's. Finch's head dropped, his hands clenching into fists. "I thought, if it looked like Edmund, no one would suspect me. I used the passage I found it months ago, repairing the gears. It was easy to slip in, do it quick, and get out. The clock was my idea, set it to chime early, so everyone would think I was in the workshop when it happened." His voice broke, a sob escaping. "I only wanted what was mine." Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes softening with a trace of pity. "Yours, Monsieur Finch. A fortune built on murder is no one's to claim. You betrayed not only Sir Reginald, but the craft he taught you. The clock, it was your masterpiece, but also your undoing. He turned to Grange, who held up the cloth bundle, a stained rag, found in Finch's lodgings. Its faint red marks, confirmed as blood by the local doctor. Grange cleared his throat, his voice gruff but steady. This seals it, Mr. Poirot. The rag, the screwdriver, the picked lockets, more than enough for a jury. He'll face justice now. He stepped forward, placing a heavy hand on Finch's shoulder. Come on, lad, time to go. Finch rose, his movements mechanical, as if the weight of his confession had drained him of life. I didn't mean for it to end like this, he murmured, almost to himself. I just wanted to be someone. Poirot shook his head, his voice low. Murder, monsieur, makes you no one but a shadow. You have stopped one clock, but time moves on. As Grange led Finch from the room, Hastings closed his notebook, his face pale. Poor devil, he muttered. He had everything to gain, and threw it all away. But Poirot, how did you know it was the screwdriver? That scratch on the cogget's such a tiny detail. Poirot's smile was faint, his eyes distant. Mon ami, the truth lies in the smallest things. The scratch was no accident. Tit was the mark of a hand, too eager, too precise. The little gray cells, they see what others overlook. He adjusted his cufflinks, his composure unshaken. But one question remains, the dagger's full story. It was stolen, oui, but its presence in the manor, its crested whispers of a deeper history. We must ensure no shadows linger. Hastings nodded, his faith in Poirot unwavering. You've done it again, old chap. Wrapped it up neatly, as always. Poirot's expression softened, but his mind was still at work, tying the final threads of the case. The Clocktower's secrets had been laid bare, Finch's guilt confirmed, but the echo of the dagger's crest lingered, a faint tick in the back of Poirot's mind. As the door closed behind Finch and Grange, the study fell silent. The mantel clock's steady rhythm, a reminder that justice, like time, was relentless. Poirot turned to the window, the clock tower visible in the distance, its hands now moving true. The puzzle was nearly complete, but Poirot's vigilance would not rest until every cog was in place. Chapter 12. The clock ticks on. The sun hung low over St. Aldwyn's, bathing the town square in a warm amber glow as the harvest festival resumed its cheerful rhythm. The cobblestones, swept clean of the previous day's revelry, echoed with the laughter of children and the chatter of villagers, their spirits lifted now that the shadow of murder had been dispelled. The clock tower, its bronze face gleaming, ticked with renewed precision, its hands moving smoothly past the hour, as if relieved of the lie that had frozen them at 3:17. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the square, his immaculate coat a stark contrast to the rustic scene, his mustache perfectly aligned, his eyes bright with the satisfaction of a puzzle solved. Captain Hastings, at his side, clutched a walking stick, his face a mix of relief and admiration. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice soft but clear above the festival's hum. The clock ticks true once more, and so does justice. The murder of Sir Reginald Vane, it was a crime of cunning, but no crime escapes the little gray cells. He adjusted his hat, his gaze drifting to the clock tower now, a symbol of truth rather than deception. Hastings, his honest features creased with a smile, shook his head. You've done it again, Poirot. Unraveled the whole thing, the passage, the dagger, Finch's alibi. I'll never know how you spot these things. That screwdriver, the oil, the willets, all so intricate. His voice carried the awe of a man who had witnessed a master at work, yet still found the process mystifying. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint spark of amusement in his eyes. It is method, Hastings, nothing more. The truth, it is like a clock, each part must fit, or it fails. The hidden passage, the tampered cog, The stolen dagger, they were cogs in Monsieur Finch's machine of deceit. But the smallest flaw, it betrays the whole. He paused, his gaze lingering on a group of villagers near a cider stall. Their laughter a stark contrast to the grim events of the tower. The final pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place earlier. That morning, when Inspector Grange returned to Vane Manor with confirmation from the manor's study. The lock on the ornate box, which had held the dagger, bore scratches matching Finch's screwdriver, and a hidden drawer in the apprentice's lodgings revealed a blood-stained cloth, hastily concealed. The dagger itself, with its Vane family crest, had been identified by the manor's housekeeper as a relic Sir Reginald kept under lock and key. An heirloom rarely shown but known to Finch from his time cataloguing the master's collection. These discoveries, coupled with Finch's confession, had sealed his fate. He was now in custody, awaiting trial. His dreams of inheritance shattered by his own hand. Poirot had visited the Clocktower one last time before leaving the manor, ensuring the mechanism was reset to its proper rhythm. The misaligned cog, adjusted by Finch to chime at 3:17, had been realigned by a local watchmaker under Poirot's watchful eye. The hidden passage, its oiled hinges exposed, was now known to the authorities, its secrecy no longer a shield for murder. The dagger, returned to evidence, would tell no more tales, its crest a silent reminder of a family torn apart by greed and betrayal. Hastings, still marveling, gestured toward the tower. It's hard to believe, Poirot, that such a peaceful town could hide such a crime. A locked room, a secret passage, a clock set to lights like something out of a novel. Poirot's smile was enigmatic, his gloved hand brushing a speck of dust from his sleeve. Life, mon ami, is often more dramatic than fiction. The human heart, it builds machines of deceit, but they are never perfect. The scratch on the cog, the oil on the hinges, the dust on a boot, these are the truths that speak when men lie. He turned, his eyes sweeping the square, where Margaret Cole's stall displayed her gleaming clocks, her sharp features softened by the festival's return. Edmund Vane, too, was visible in the distance, his cigarette glowing as he stood alone, his bitterness perhaps tempered by the resolution of his father's murder. Poirot's thoughts lingered on the suspects briefly. Margaret Cole, cleared of suspicion, would continue her trade, her rivalry with Sir Reginald, now a footnote in her story. Edmund, though innocent of murder, carried the weight of his estrangement, a wound that time might never heal. But it was Finch, the apprentice, whose fall resonated most a young man given opportunity, only to destroy it with ambition. Poirot shook his head, a rare flicker of melancholy crossing his face. "Come, Hastings," he said, turning toward the inn where they were staying. "The festival awaits, and even Hercule Poirot may enjoy a moment of repose. The cider, perhaps, it is not so clouded as you think." Hastings laughed, falling into step beside him, his spirits buoyed by the case's closure. As they walked, the clock tower chimed, its clear, resonant tone echoing across the square. The villagers paused, smiling at the sound, a symbol of their town's heart restored. Poirot's gaze lingered on the tower, its hands moving steadily, each tick a testament to order reclaimed. "The clock ticks on," he murmured, "and so does the truth." The festival's music swelled, a fiddler's tune weaving through the air, and St. Aldwyn's carried on, its secrets laid bare under Poirot's meticulous gaze. The case was closed, the puzzle complete, and Hercule Poirot, with his little gray cells, walked into the crowd, ready for whatever mystery time might next bring.